Welcome to my playlist on coding using C Sharp. And in this one, I will be looking at just some introduction to data types and things like that. And so for C Sharp, I will be using the Integrated Development Environment, or IDE, called Visual Studio, and it's the 2022 version. And so C Sharp used the namespace, the system.console, for handling our standard input and output. So we'll be using the write and write line and the read and read line methods for this. And so we will see that when I get to sort of the coding demo in here. But for now, I'll sort of introduce us to some of the very basics here. So the console is the operating system window where users interact with the operating system. And so that is something that looks like this. And so this would be, well, this is a command prompt, but it will look very similar to this, and we will see what that looks like here in a few minutes. But that's known as the terminal. And so for our code, and so we'll be looking at code in so this is the Visual Studio 2022 IDE right here. And so we can input code into here. And so I have this up here. So we have this class, we have our main method here and our system. So this is our console.write line, and so that is what it will actually print out. And so before I input that into our IDE, let's go over what some of these things are. So this class keyword here is something that contains a set of instructions that can be called upon. And so that's something we'll need for object-oriented programming, which I will get to in a later video. So at this point, you just have to know that we have to put our code into a class. And so then we have this main method here, which actually if we go down here to 4, so main is the code that will actually be executed. And so later on we'll see that that the code in the main method can call on other methods and classes and so forth. So, the stuff that's in the main method is the stuff that will actually be executed, but the stuff that can be executed can call to other things that are not within the main method. And so you can actually execute other code than what's in the main method by calling it in the main method. But then we have these modifiers here of our main method. So we have the static and void. So static is a modifier. This is the program, has no dynamic functions, this is another object-oriented programming thing. And so it's just saying that if it's static, that this is something that can't be sort of instantiated as an object in object-oriented programming. And then this void is just telling us that it doesn't return a value. So the main method here, it will execute this code here, this hello C# here, but it won't return anything that then another method could use after that. Then these curly brackets, which I have here labeled as 5, so that's the code that or that contains everything within the function. And so everything contained within these curly brackets is sort of part of this main method here. And so we can actually put this code in. So we have class, and at this point what we name the class doesn't really matter. So we'll just call it hello C#. Then we will want to put curly brackets. So usually in this IDE, when you put that first curly bracket, so we can see that again, it automatically puts that second one. You can hit enter and it will just go to the next line indented the way that we have it here. So it's indented. Now we'll do that static void main. So this stuff here in the argument of main, I'm not going to do, so you'll see that quite often. That's something we don't have to worry about just yet. But at this point, we don't need to worry about putting that in there. So we can just put our static void main, we do have to put those parentheses there. That tells us that that is a method. So a method is something that will have these parentheses afterwards. And so you'll see in this IDE that a method is something that shows up as yellow like this. And so if we don't have those, then this becomes this sort of gray here, and that makes it so it's not a method. So you have to put those parentheses after it for it to be considered a method. All right, so now we can use our console.writeLine. So this has system written here. System is usually sort of just assumed to be here, or it's assumed to be used in this, so we don't actually have to write that. So we can just write console.writeLine, and remember, this is case sensitive, so we do need the uppercase C, we need this uppercase W and L on here. And so we can write console, and you can see this IDE actually has this sort of autocomplete thing, so that actually can be very helpful, by in making things easier for you. And we'll see in later videos too that it can autofill some things that are, just used quite often, like when we get to for loops and things like that. So we can then just hit tab twice. So we see that this writeLine is a method. And so in this, we're putting in the argument. So we start with parentheses, and so we can just write something in here. So usually when you first start programming, it'll be something like hello world. Then we put that there, and then we need the semicolon afterwards. So the semicolon is sort of telling us that this thing is completed here, that this whole thing is finished now, and so we're not adding anything else to it. So you do need that. And you'll notice too that in this IDE, another thing that's very helpful, so if we get rid of that, you'll see this error thing down here. It'll say that on line 5, which is what we have right here, it's expecting this semicolon. And so we can actually put that semicolon there, and then it will get rid of that, and we have no issues found. And so then we can hit this little green triangle button here, and you will see that this should pop up our window, and so we have hello world printed right here. And so this just prints, this program that I just wrote just prints what I had there, and so that's all it does. And we know that it's a void, and so it's not returning a value that could then be used with something else. And so that is, kind of the very basic program. That's often the program you will see in any sort of programming book that you find, or in a programming class you take. This sort of hello world is always sort of the first program that you will find. So I mentioned this thing before, keywords, and so these are some of the keywords that will be used. And I have in these red rectangles here, I have boxed in some of the keywords that we will be sort of encountering here very early on. We will, as you code, you will eventually sort of run into all of these, but these are some of the main ones we'll be seeing. And you can see I kind of forgot to box like void here, but the idea is these are keywords, and so keywords are things that will show up in this blue here quite often. And so they're usually in blue or they are in purple, but we will encounter the purple ones starting in the next video, where we get to for and if statements and things like that. So there are these data types that we want to look at. And so the data types are these here on the left-hand column. So we have integers, we have long, float, double, and decimal. And so those are all different types of numbers. And so the the difference between them is sort of the numbers they can kind of represent. And so that's the description we have here. And we see that they also take up different sizes here. So they take up different amounts of memory. And so as you get into coding, one of the things that becomes very important is having your code be as efficient as possible. So using as little memory as possible and doing things in as few operations as possible. And so these memory considerations really come into play for a lot of this. And so that's why it's important to know sort of the the size, the memory size of these different data types. And so int is one that is used quite often. And so these are whole numbers, so they don't have any decimal places, and they are whole numbers between -2 to the 31 power and 2 to the 31 power. So that's about 10 digits, and so that is between this negative 2 billion here and this positive 2 billion or so here. Long are whole numbers between -2 to the 63rd and 2 to the 63rd, so that is about 19 digits, and so that is between these two numbers here. And so you see that int is 32 bits, long is 64 bits, and so this is one of those things where memory considerations come into account. You want to use essentially the smallest size number that you can get away with. And so if you're looking at numbers, that are very small, like tens, hundreds, thousands, even millions, you're adding and subtracting those, then you'll want to use int. If you start needing much larger numbers, then you'll want to switch to long. Then of course we also want numbers that can have decimal points, and so that is float, double, and decimal. And so we see float is 32 bits. That can go about 6 to 9 digits past the decimal. Double is then 64 bits, which can go 15 to 17 digits past the decimal. Then decimal is 128 bits, and so that can go 128 to 129 digits past the decimal. And so once again, if you're looking at numbers that only go like a couple places past the decimal, then float is the kind you will want to use because it's the smallest size. But if you want to get really high precision, then you'll go up to decimal, which can go really far past the decimal point. Then there are these three types of data types that we will be encountering quite often. So there are characters, which are just single characters, such as a single letter, a single number, a single symbol. And so when you put numbers into this, though, you can't use math on the numbers. So it's essentially saying this number sort of in quotes, but it's not actually the number. Whereas with these other data types up here, you can actually do arithmetic on them. So you can add, subtract, multiply, divide, those kinds of things on those data types. Then the string is multiple characters, so this would be things like whole sentences. And so what we saw here, so this hello world, when we put it in the double quotes like this, that is a string. And what you'll find is that so if we did something like console.writeLine, if you'd use a single quote like this, then you might put something like H in there, and so that is a character when we have it in the single quotes there. And then you can only put a single character in there. So an H, or we could put like a 3 there, or we could put like an and in there. You'll find later that you can't put all the symbols in there because some of them have other meanings. But when we're looking at this character, so you just put a single letter or number or symbol in there. We see that a character is 8 bits where a string is 16 bits per character. And we can also do bool, which is essentially just true or false. So that is just a single bit, which makes sense because you can have 0 for false, 1 for true, and so on. And then we have these arithmetic operators here that we can use on our well, mostly our numbers up here, but we have these arithmetic operators here. So we have the unary operators, which like this plus and minus x here, just sort of increases something by the x, so whatever we've defined x as, and so forth. We have the arithmetic multiplicative, so that is multiply, divide, and the modulus here. We have the additive, so plus and minus, and relational, less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. And also, by the way I have it organized in this table is in the order of operation. So things up at the top are going to have the highest priority in the order of operations. Then things down below will have the lowest priority in the order of operations. Then we have the logical equality, or I guess not equality. And so that is just sort of comparing two different values and saying, are these things equal to each other? Then we have these logical operators. So the ones we'll be mostly using are these ones here. So the conditional and conditional or. Then we can have these conditionals here. So we can have some condition here, then we put a question mark, T and colon F, and so we can put different things here after that question mark. So when C is true, it'll do whatever T is telling us to do. Otherwise, it will do F. And then we have the assignment, which we can kind of see here. So the first one is this. So we have int here, which is telling us which data type we're using. And so you see that shows up in blue here because that is one of our keywords. So this int right here is one of our keywords. Then we are using A as the thing that we are setting, that we are assigning to 5 here. Then with these assignments down here, you can actually perform these operations on it. So A plus equals 9 just takes our 5, which is what we set our A to, and then adds 9. Then when we have A minus equal 4, that takes what we have up here. So this was our 14. So right here, we took our 5, we added 9 to it, made it 14. Then we subtract 4, that makes it 10. We times 2, that makes it 20. We divide by 4, which gives us 5. And then we take the modulus 3, and that gives us 2. And so we can actually kind of look at that here. So we have our int A equals 5, and so that was what we did here at the beginning. So we have A equals 5, so we've sort of said, we've assigned to this A here 5. And so now, so say if we wanted to console.writeLine A, so we could click this and then it just prints out 5. And so this is printing out what we've assigned to A there. And so now we can go through here. So we have A plus equals 9. So A plus equals 9. And so that would give us the same thing we have here. So we could then do console.writeLine A. So it will still print out up here and print out down here. And so we see the first one it's 5, and then the next one it's 14. We could do the same thing with multiply and subtract. So I'm not going to go through all of these. You can sort of see what would keep happening if we kept going through these things here. And so now I'm going to actually do sort of a coding demo here where I show some of these things going on here. And so again, we have our class, we have our static void main here. And so one of the things we can do is, so we can do console.writeLine, autofill that. So we can do enter, enter first number. Then what we can actually do is int first num. So this first num here, that's the name of the thing. So we're assigning to this thing that we see, and that will always be in kind of this cyan color here. Is the thing is what we're assigning to this right here. So then we could perform operations on this thing that we are calling first num. And so what I'm actually going to do is use another method called convert.toInt32. And so the reason we're doing that is because when we input something using the read line, it will always be read as a string. And so we actually want to convert that string into an integer so we can perform mathematical operations on it. And so then what we will do is console.readLine. And so what this is doing is it will read what we type in and then convert it to an integer and then assign that integer to this int first num here. So that is what that will be doing. And so then we can do console.writeLine. See, it's already anticipating that I want to do that. Enter second number. Then we will do int second num, and see now it's already anticipating that I want to do that. We will do console.writeLine. We'll put in here enter third number. Then we can go down here, int third num, and so now it gave us that. And so this will allow the user to enter numbers into this. And so then what we can do is we can now use float, which remember is our 32-bit decimal place containing number. So we will do sum. So we're assigning a float number to this thing that we're calling sum here. And so what I'm actually going to do, and so that's what I have down here, is this thing called typecasting, which is converting from one numeric data type to another. And so I'm actually going to do float in parentheses like that. And so now we can do first num plus second num plus third num. And then we want to put our semicolon there to tell us that that is what we are going to do, or that is where we are stopping here. So you can see that I actually forgot an equal sign here. So we see down at the bottom it's giving me all these different errors, and so I forgot to put an equal sign here. And so the single equal sign is the assignment equal, and so we are saying that this sum is equal to the sum of these. And then we have this float here in parentheses telling us that we want to convert these to float because we want to actually have decimal points in what we end up with here. And so I'm going to do float avg equals, then we'll do sum divided by 3. So this is taking the average of these three numbers. So whatever we punch in here will be the average. And so now we can do console.writeLine. And so we will then have the average is. And so what I'm actually going to do here, and this is something we can do in a string. So I'm going to put a curly bracket, 0 curly bracket, then comma, and then I can actually put AVG here. And so in the curly brackets here, it will actually substitute what I have in the first position after this comma here into it. And so we can see if I run this program, so it prompts me to enter the first number, so I can do 5. It prompts me to enter the second number, so I can do 7. It prompts me to enter the third number. I can do that. Then it says the average is 7, which makes sense. 5 plus 7 plus 9. Then divide that by 3. That will give us 7. 7 is right in the middle there. But if we then instead use something like 5, 7, and 13, say, so now, see, it's giving us this 8.3333. So this is using our float data type, and so it's allowing for these numbers past the decimal place here. And so that is what sort of doing the typecasting to float is allowing us to do. And so, yeah, this is a program that just takes 3 numbers from the user, then it performs these mathematical operations on them, and then outputs what we have here for average. And so, yeah, this is a very simple program, but it is a program nonetheless. And I will have that program here in the show notes with some comments on it, which I guess is something else I can point out that we can do. If we use these double slashes here, we can actually input comments. So we could say right here, double slash, this is a comment. And so that is something that will not be part of the code. It's something that you, when you're trying to read the code, sort of allows you to understand what is actually going on here. So in what I'll have here in the lecture notes are these comments here sort of saying what each of these things is doing, in case you want to sort of look at this in a little bit more detail yourself. But anyway, that is the introduction here to coding and data types and keywords, which are things that will be used sort of ubiquitously throughout all of these things. So it's always kind of the first thing to introduce in order for you to understand what's going on. So in the next video, I'll be looking at a few of the things we can do beyond just arithmetical operations with these data types, which are the if and if else statements, and then the for loops and while loops. I won't be getting into for each loops yet because I'll need to introduce some data structures, which will be what I do after the next video. But anyway, I don't want to drag on too long. I hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you in the next one.